Welcome CCNA 3. This is being recorded for Tuesday, the 26th of August. Here we go. Chapter 1 is relatively short. It's as much a review as anything else. I'm gonna record for about 20 minutes and then stop, and then hopefully you can get some other work done. If you have questions, please ask, but realize that I'm working with my other groups of students. There are 4 sections to this. The summary at the end is probably the part that needs the least introduction, so let's go into this. We're going to talk about converged networks. We talked a little bit about this last year, how networks are, well, they're changing, and how you're putting lots of things on the same data network. A good example is the school district. Our security cameras are on the network. Our phones are on the network. Part of the intercom system, which is why sometimes the phones give that horrid beeping, or beep, and then somebody, usually a vice principal, will talk. We need to do something about that beep. Even clocks are being put on the network, and all of that alongside your data for the regular computer use, the video and audio, and just standard web pages. And all the other work we do is storing files. So everything's going into the same data network. The advantages far outweigh the disadvantages, and we'll talk about that as time goes on. We'll talk about small to medium-sized businesses and their switch networks. This is where the money is, folks. It's in the small to medium businesses that you have the jobs. Big businesses do have jobs too, but when you think of, a small business as anyone under 50 employees, that's about 80%. Medium-sized business have 50 to 500 employees. That's another almost 15%. So it's really only about 5 to 10% of employees work in big businesses. Yes, that does mean the school district is considered a large business if we were a for-profit institution. Okay, process of frame forwarding we'll talk about. Collision domains versus broadcast domains. We talked a little bit about that last year. We're going to talk a lot about it this year. Let's talk about complexity. Once upon a time, what served as data networks only had text. Your web pages had minimal pictures. Even now, you'll see that I drift back to that. I have a lot fewer pictures than a lot of people, and that's because in my era, when I was doing this a lot, and especially when I was working with students a lot on this, we used text only. Biggest pictures took forever to load. That's changed. With your modern switch networks, everything goes on the network. You see in the picture switches and routers. You see phones, but other things as well. Smart thermostats are pretty common. Your smart light plugs, where you quite literally can control the lights from anywhere in the world, or control the lock of your house, or control whether your garage door is up or down. I have a friend who lives in Clear Lake. He was in Japan on business, and his phone buzzed and said that his alarm went off. He pulled it up and pulled a live video feed of his house in Clear Lake. Mind you, he's in Tokyo. He pulls this live feed. A deer had crashed through the window in his kitchen and was stuck. The antlers were stuck, and so there's this, he looked, I kid you not, he showed me a picture. I wish I had gotten it. He took a screenshot because this deer's antlers were stuck, and the deer's head was in this kitchen sink. He called his neighbor, who came over and came from the inside and pushed the deer out, helped the deer get clear, and then fixed the window. But the idea is that all of that's available over the network today. And the next generation, every tree will have its own IP address and its own sensors for health of trees. Central Park's already starting this. Central Park, New York. They have something like 750,000 trees, and they're digitizing everything. And you'll see that. Our HVAC system, we complain that it doesn't work, but if I need it fixed, if I complain, they remote in from the district office speeds. It's on the network. And yes, there are some advantages and disadvantages of that. Disadvantages being security, Advantages meaning that, well, if we're the security threat, but never mind that. No, they actually have talked about giving me access so I can look at it and show you guys. And that brings us to the last bullet. Networks need to be secure. They need to be reliable. They need to be available. We need to be able to see what's available on the network. We need to be able to have it reliable and available all the time so that we can get our work done. When I'm making a call, I want that call to come crystal clear. I don't want it to sound like I'm in a tunnel. Let's move on. Converged networks require collaboration, require us to work together, require our equipment to work together. That's an advantage of converged networks. Remember, before we converged, we had a separate network for clocks, a separate network for intercoms, for phones, for data, for cameras. Each of those was completely independent of the others. It was much more expensive, much more time-consuming because you had to have a totally different team of people work on it. You had a little overlap, but really one person couldn't know it all. Now it's all one system. Even down to the security system, the security alarms, at least in theory, could be on this same network. They're not into the school, so you can't hack through the security alarms because they're not attached. The fire alarms also are not attached, but they could be, and in some buildings are. We have a lot of things a lot of data services. Your voice, your IP phones, requires voice gateways, video conferencing is a big deal. If you want to conference with someone in another city, you now can do it via video conference. Skype is a good example, WebEx is another, rather than just using audio, and it does help a lot. The last bullet, call control, voice messaging, mobility, automated attendant are common features of a voice network. Put that voice network on your data network. This is your phone system now on your data network, and now your data network converges. So when I get a voicemail, it no longer shows a little light on my phone saying, hey, you've got a voicemail. Actually, at Pioneer, those lights never worked because the contractor was an idiot. We've talked about that last part. Anyway, it sends me an email. I get the voicemail as an email in my inbox, so I'm anywhere in the world. I can see that someone has sent me a note, and I'm ready to answer it. So call control and voice messaging and mobility, which is your portable phones. I actually Kaiser does this. You can, when my doctor calls me at the evening, he often is at home, but it appears from a Kaiser number because he uses his phone at home to call a central, it's called a voice bridge, and that then can be used to dial me. That way the call is recorded and it doesn't give out his home phone number, which is really good news. That function is not enabled for the school district, but they could very easily enable it so that I could call from home or from the road and have it appear as if I'm physically at the Pioneer campus. That can be done now. Auto attendant, it picks up the phone and it's kind of like an answering machine. Benefits, you only have one network to manage. Instead of dealing with 4 or 5 or 6 separate networks, everything's on one network. And so you save a lot of money. The clock network in this campus cost about $12,000 to install. And yes, that's doing it poorly to where the clocks don't work right. On that note, it looks like my clock may be right today. First time in almost 2 weeks. But it's significantly cheaper. I just run a data network. I know how to run a data network. I'm already running a data network, so why bother with the others? We've actually abandoned our phone network. We've abandoned those wires in the walls. We're never going to use them again, or likely. Had they installed it slightly differently, we could just repurpose those as data ports, but the installers wanted them to be completely separate, and I actually talked with the architect about that, because even then that we were moving this direction, and the architect was An unpleasant person with a personality to match. There, that's more polite than what I was going to say. And of course didn't listen to me, even though in the end I of course am right. You guys know that already. So installation, a couple of other advantages. If I have to rewire something, or if I need some functionality I didn't have, I can get it much more cheaply. A good example is Lee Junior High. Lee didn't have an intercom system, was never built with one, was never retrofit with one. They need one. And then at the same time, their master clock is going dead. It's 50 or 60 years old. That's roughly life expectancy of a master clock system, 50 or 60 years, except at Pioneer where 10 years seems to be it. And the master clock runs the bells. That needs to be replaced. They need an intercom system. The clocks are dying. Well, they've got a data network. All of that is now on their data network. Everything comes through the data network now. And it's one system. IT was already running a data network. They just ran a couple of extra ports. In the process, they got security cameras. They got a lot of other things. A lot of functionality, and at significantly lower cost, because you don't have to deal with, oh, it's so expensive to run another network on top of it. No, just run it on your existing data network that you're already having to put there. One more wire in the wall is not very expensive. And the IT department is already managing a network anyway. This additional devices cost a minimal amount. Yes, it is a cost. I'm not going to say it's zero. But if your data network is D and your phone network is P, D plus P is more than D plus a few phones on D. I know that's a horrible example. Deal with it. IT management then is something we've dealt with. Let's move on. Cisco borderless networks is what we call the network architecture for what we call anyone, anywhere, anytime on any device. I actually saw this advertised, or not advertised. I was sitting in a conference and they actually demonstrated this, where a guy was on his IP phone, like the one I have on my desk, and actually an older model of the 7900 series that I have. Looked just like my phone. He was talking to another guy who was in the room, which is kind of weird, but the guy was halfway around on the other side of the room, probably 30 feet away. They were talking, and he said, okay, let me just transfer you to my other thing. He pushed a couple of buttons on his phone, and his cell phone rang. And he's talking, and we can hear both the guys over the speaker system. They're both wired. And he picks up his cell phone, and it says, now connecting. His phone on his hand, the desktop phone, the IP phone like mine, hung up because the call was now on his cell phone. It had transferred automatically. And from the other end, the guy on the other end had seamless. He was in the middle of a word, and it switched phones that it sent to in the middle of a word. Very much seamless. Anywhere, anyone, anywhere, anytime, any device. And you want it secure. You don't want people to be able to break into it. You want it reliable. You want it always available. And you want it just plain seamless. You just want to be able to do it. With the converged network, we also saw people working from home. We saw them working, Starbucks is a big place. You guys are familiar with that because I've talked about connecting there when I do my work. I was traveling early last week, and I sat in a Starbucks in, where was I? Calabasas. Half a dozen people had their laptops out. They were getting some work done. Some of them were in suits. Some of them were wearing jeans. There was a guy in what looks like he was headed to the beach to go surfing, had a laptop out. He was getting some work done. Because anywhere, anytime. Anyone, anywhere, anytime, any device. And a friend of mine worked for Cisco for a long time. He's now with Citrix. And he said that his wife made a comment once that she knew when he had switched to video because he started wearing a tie in his home office. He had a cubicle in San Jose. He never went there. For a while, I think it was like 6 months that he hadn't even gone to the San Jose office. He didn't need to. He was working from his home office. And she knew when he moved to video because he would wear a tie. He was selling product to a lot of bigwigs. They expect him in a tie. So there he is. I saw him once. He's in his board shorts. That's here in town. He's in his board shorts. He's in his huaraches, and he's wearing a nice, crisp, ironed shirt and a necktie. Because you can see him from the waist up in the pictures or in the video. So that's the changing work patterns. The one of a handful of professions that won't see this change is teaching, because we kind of need to be, at least to an extent, close to in the same room with most of our students. I know you're going to say, well, we can go online school, and yeah, I've taken those, but classrooms do have a lot of advantages. Namely, you can go have lunch with your friends. That's the advantage for you, not for me. A couple of principles of borderless networks, and I'm probably going to make this my last slide. I might do one more. Borderless are going to be hierarchical, modular, they're resilient, and they're flexible. So borderless networks, we use a hierarchical model, which means that certain things have more access than others, and certain things are designed to do certain things. They're kind of specialists. Think of this as you have elementary, you have and you have secondary. You have elementary, the teachers are generalists. They teach a lot of different things. You'll have that, one part of the hierarchy. Secondary, we're specialists. We're very much specialists in our own field in what we do. And that's how this land design will work. If you think of it, if you look at the picture there on the left, the 3-tier land design started with an access layer, which is where people connect. Distribution distributes the data across your enterprise, and core layer spreads that to other groups. Your internet access would be a core layer. Now we're going with a 2-layer. How do you get onto the network? And then how do we get you out to the world where you need to get your work done? That's a way of looking at the difference between the 2- and 3-tier designs. We'll talk more about them, and we'll talk there because I'm going to stop here. I've hit my 20 minutes, or very nearly. We're going to stop here on slide 9, so I'm about a third of the way through. Hard to believe that I got a third of the way through. I will record another video for tomorrow, and then we'll continue. Right now, I want you to work on your study guide. That should fill the rest of your period. Let me know if you have questions.